This ruthless million-dollar corporate boss thought she could blackmail her broke assistant into a fake marriage just to save herself from deportation. For 3 years, she treated him like absolute garbage, making him run across town at dawn just to fetch her coffee. But the second they step off the plane in his tiny hometown, her blood runs cold. She looks around and realizes every single business, boat, and mansion in the state bears his last name. In the high-stakes world of New York book publishing, Margaret Tate is the undisputed alpha. She earns a cool $1 million a year, commands absolute fear, and has earned the nickname the Witch from her terrified staff. Margaret has zero personal life, zero friends, and absolutely zero mercy. If you cut the line outside her office or bring her the wrong style of Starbucks coffee, you are fired on the spot. Just ask Bob, her senior editor. When Bob underperforms, Margaret doesn't pull him into a private room. She fires him right in the middle of the crowded executive hallway, completely unbothered by his rage. But behind her terrifying, untouchable exterior, Margaret has a massive hidden problem. She is a Canadian citizen, and in her obsession with dominating the corporate ladder, she completely forgot to renew her work visa. Now, it has officially expired. The top board of directors calls her into a sudden meeting and drops a devastating bombshell. The U.S. government is officially deporting her back to Canada. The board decides that the moment she is kicked out of the country, her position will be handed directly to Bob, the exact same man she humiliated and fired just hours prior. Margaret's entire life flashes before her eyes. She is facing total professional ruin, but just as she's about to break down, her overworked assistant, Andrew, walks into the office to deliver her paperwork. Andrew has spent 3 long years enduring her verbal abuse, canceling his family vacations, and working midnight shifts just hoping for a promotion to editor. Looking at Andrew, a desperate, brilliant, and completely illegal idea sparks in Margaret's mind. She turns to the board directors, wraps her arm around Andrew, and announces that they can't deport her because she and Andrew are secretly getting married. Andrew freezes in absolute disbelief. He tries to speak, but Margaret digs her fingers into his shoulder, silently warning him to play along. The next morning, they find themselves sitting inside the sterile offices of the U.S. Immigration Service. The officer, Mr. Gilbertson, is a seasoned fraud hunter who immediately smells a rat. He separates them and lays out the cold, hard reality of visa fraud. If this marriage is a sham, they aren't just looking at a fine. They are facing a mandatory 5 years in federal prison and a massive $250,000 penalty. Gilbertson warns them that he is going to thoroughly audit their lives, test them separately on their deepest secrets, and if a single answer doesn't align, Margaret is gone forever. The moment they step out onto the busy New York streets, Andrew decides he is completely done being a doormat. He tells Margaret he is walking away and letting her get deported, but Margaret fires back with a ruthless counterattack. She reminds him that the second she is gone, Bob takes over the company. Bob hates Andrew, meaning Andrew will be fired, his career will be destroyed, and the novel he has been secretly writing for years will never be published. Andrew realizes he is trapped, but this time, he demands a price for his compliance. If he is going to risk prison for her, he wants an immediate promotion to editor. He wants his book published in the main window, and most importantly, he forces his terrifying boss to get down on her knees right in the middle of a crowded Manhattan intersection and ask for his hand in marriage nicely. Left with absolutely no choice, the icy corporate queen swallows her pride, drops to her knees in the dirt, and begs her assistant to marry her. To make the engagement look authentic to the government, Margaret is forced to travel with Andrew to his hometown of Sitka, Alaska, to celebrate his grandmother's 90th birthday. Margaret expects a rural, rundown village filled with simple country folk, but the moment they roll into town, the psychological power dynamic completely shatters. As they drive down the main street, Margaret looks out the window of the truck and rubs her eyes. She passes the Paxton General Store, then the Paxton Parcel Post, then Paxton Photography. She turns to Andrew and asks why his last name is plastered on every single building in the state. Andrew casually shrugs it off. Before Margaret can even process this information, they arrive at the docks and board a sleek, high-end luxury yacht. As the boat rounds the massive rock walls of the coast, a towering multi-million-dollar lakeside mansion comes into view, complete with private helipads and immaculate landscaping. The broke, desperate assistant she spent 3 years bossing around is actually a secret billionaire. The mansion is packed with townspeople throwing a massive welcome home party. Andrew's mother, Grace, and his eccentric grandmother, Annie, immediately smother Margaret in warm, genuine hugs, thrilled that Andrew has finally found the love of his life. But the atmosphere turns incredibly tense when Andrew's father, Joe, enters the room. Joe is a powerful, stern tycoon who controls the family empire, and he deeply resents Andrew's decision to move to New York and work a low-level assistant job rather than taking over the family business. Joe immediately senses that something is completely fake about Margaret, treating her with cold sarcasm. To shut his father up and protect the lie, Andrew grabs Margaret in front of the entire crowd, pops a bottle of champagne, and announces their upcoming wedding. The crowd erupts into cheers, demanding that the happy couple share a passionate kiss. With 100 pairs of eyes staring at them, the two corporate rivals are forced to lock lips for the very first time. But as the kiss lingers in the warm, tipsy atmosphere of the party, a strange, unexpected spark ignites between them, leaving both of them visibly shaken. Because the family believes they are madly in love, Margaret and Andrew are forced to share the same bedroom. The awkwardness hits an all-time high as Andrew lays out a single blanket on the hard floor for himself, leaving the massive bed for his boss. Margaret is awakened by her phone ringing frantically. It's her office in New York. Desperate for a signal, she steps out onto the front porch wearing a high-end silk robe. Following her out is Grandma Annie's incredibly expensive tiny white puppy. As Margaret is arguing with her editors on the phone, a massive wild hawk suddenly swoops down from the Alaskan sky, hooks its talons directly into the puppy, and begins lifting it into the air. With no options left, Margaret forcefully hurls her expensive smartphone directly at the bird. The hawk drops the puppy, snatches the phone in its talons instead, and flies away into the mountains. Andrew's family watches the tail end of the scene from the window, completely misinterpreting the chaos. They think Margaret was aggressively dancing and playing with the dog, labeling her an absolute angel who loves animals. Later that afternoon, Grace and Grandma Annie take Margaret to the town's local bridal boutique. Grandma Annie pulls out a stunning, pristine vintage wedding gown passed down through the Paxton family for over 150 years. They place a priceless, custom emerald necklace around Margaret's neck, tears welling up in their eyes as they tell her she is officially a daughter of Alaska. Looking at herself in the mirror wearing the sacred clothing of a family that genuinely loves her, a crushing wave of guilt hits Margaret. Desperate to clear her head, Margaret flees to the docks, jumps onto the family's high-speed motorboat, and guns the engine. As they fly across the open water, Margaret's emotional turmoil boils over. She screams at Andrew that she can't do this anymore. In her distraction, she doesn't see a massive metal buoy directly in their path. Andrew screams, ripping the wheel to the side to avoid a fatal crash. The violent swerve sends Margaret flying over the edge, plunging her directly into the freezing, deep Alaskan waters. Margaret sinks like a stone, completely paralyzed by the cold. Without a second thought, Andrew dives over the railing, swims down into the dark water, wraps his arms around her, and drags her back to the surface, saving her life. They return to the estate dripping wet, wrapped in blankets, completely emotionally exposed. But the peace is instantly shattered when they open the doors of the family barn. Standing in the shadows is Mr. Gilbertson, the immigration officer. He tracked them all the way from New York to Alaska, and he has already told Andrew's father the truth about the visa fraud. Joe is furious, demanding that Andrew confess. Gilbertson corners Andrew, offering him a complete legal amnesty and a clean record if he turns Margaret in right now. He looks the officer in the eye and lies, stating that the marriage is 100% real and they are getting married tomorrow. The next morning, the grand estate is transformed into a breathtaking wedding venue. The aisle is lined with beautiful white flowers, and the entire town is seated in anticipation. Andrew stands at the altar in a sharp black tuxedo, his heart racing. The doors open, and Margaret walks down the aisle, looking like an absolute vision in the 150-year-old family gown. She steps up to the altar, and the priest begins the ceremony. But as the priest asks if anyone objects, Margaret looks at Grandma Annie's smiling face, looks at Andrew's eyes, and realizes she cannot go through with this ultimate deception. She stops the ceremony. In front of the immigration officer, the parents, and the entire town, Margaret bravely confesses everything. She admits that the engagement was a ruthless corporate blackmail scheme, that she used Andrew to keep her job, and that his family is far too beautiful to be ruined by her lies, turns her back on the altar, and walks out of the church alone to catch the first flight back to New York to face her deportation. Andrew stands at the altar completely frozen as the gravity of what just happened sinks in. He realizes he has completely fallen in love with her. He tries to run after her, but his father blocks his path, telling him to let the criminal go. To help him catch her, Grandma Annie pulls off the ultimate power move. She fakes a massive dramatic heart attack right on the grass. The panicked family scrambles onto a private plane to rush her to the hospital, but mid-flight, Annie pops her oxygen mask off, winks at Andrew, and tells the pilot to redirect the plane straight to the New York airport. Cut to the bustling New York publishing headquarters. Margaret is standing in her empty office, quietly packing her life into cardboard boxes, waiting for the immigration officers to escort her to the border. Suddenly, the double doors of the bullpen fly open. Andrew walks through the crowded office, stopping right in front of her desk as the entire staff stops to watch. Andrew looks at her and delivers an intense confession. He tells her that 3 days ago, he absolutely loathed her. He used to dream about her getting hit by a cab, but then they went to Alaska. Everything changed, and now he can't imagine his life without her. Margaret tries to push him away, crying, admitting that she is terrified of ruining his life and facing prison. But Andrew doesn't care about the risk. He steps forward, wraps his hands around her face, and commands her to shut up. In front of the entire office, he asks her to marry him for real this time. Margaret smiles through her tears, says yes, and they lock into a passionate, authentic kiss.